How many of you in here have been up to the hieroglyphics at the mouth of the canyon? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so a lot of you have been here probably in Fillmore a while, and you've heard about them, known about them, and heard stories about them, right? Okay, well, I'm going to try and update you on as much as I know about them as I can, and there's a lot more. First of all, these hieroglyphics were found in 1939. This is a copy of them. This is a picture. You can see the numbers I've put below each character. It's not quite as good as I'd like, but that's as good as my printer was going to print for me. When you start expanding some of these photographs up to big pictures, you lose a little clarity. But it was found in 1939. Some of you probably remember Clifford Purcell and Rube Melville. The two of them were doing some prospecting up there. And if you're up in that area near the mouth of the canyon, you'll notice that there's kind of a red streak that goes through there. Oftentimes with streaks like that, there's some mineralization, usually iron or some other ores that are associated with it. So they were doing some investigation around that area. Apparently Clifford came across them, and he eventually called Rube over, and they got looking around at them and had to clear some of the stuff that was off of these. They had to, a lot of you have seen how moss and lichen grow on rocks. There was moss and lichen. They describe it as covering these. This was in Clifford's words when I interviewed him a few years ago. Said 4 rows, kind of like picture writing, full of lichen, full of green stuff. One facing west, and there was a hand and an eye looking thing that faces north. That was this one. This one here, right now, is down behind the Forest Service office. Locally, it's referred to as the signature rock. When this particular rock was in place up on the mountain, it faced north. And over the top of this character right here, which is that M with an eye looking thing he described, there was a red ochre handprint. You know, you've seen maybe some of the early Indian writings around that they've used kind of a red paint. Well, that's what it was, and it was a handprint placed right over the top of that one. So that's how it was when it was originally found. The rock that this is on eventually fell down, and this was facing up into the sun. And of course, you know what the sun does to paints and things, it bleaches them out. Eventually that handprint was gone. About 10 years ago, Dale Allgood took this rock from up there on the mountain. See these writings? People were starting to mark on it. His interest was to preserve the rock, but seeing how it was on federal property, it really wasn't his. So we went down and rescued it from him, and it's now down to the Forest Service office for all to enjoy. It'd be nice if I had it back up there, but that's a good place to interpret it too. So that's why the one rock is down at the Forest Service office now, where the main site is up on the mountain here. When Clifford Purcell and Rube Melville had been up to that site and investigated, the first thing they did is come down to town. They went down to the pool hall. Of course, that's where all the information and knowledge was stored in Fillmore at that time. But they went in to discuss with any of the people that were there and asked if any of them were aware of it. And they weren't. They said they were aware of a map rock, which they refer to, which this is a picture of here. which is probably about 300 yards below these other writings, a little bit lower down on the hill on a bench. It says they was aware of those, but they knew nothing about these hieroglyphics. So then the immediate question comes in. Is this rock associated with these writings? Okay, I can't answer that directly for you, but I can give you a couple of interesting things which people do when they go up there. People have an interest in these. If you can look at this picture, I know it's a little difficult to see from down there. It's got a bunch of holes that have been ground out in the rock, and then some lines around it connecting them and going different places. I have people go up there that say one of the ways that ancients did maps and did directions was they'd take maybe a clump of mud, stick it in one of those holes and put up a stick. Then they'd take another one and put up a stick, and they'd use that as a sighting tool to direct you over here. Now, if that's true and these have anything to do with it, if you go up there and look at that rock, you see that there's 3 holes right here. And if you sight right across those 3 holes, they go directly to the hieroglyphics. I don't know if that is meaningful or not, but it's interesting. So they may be related, they may not. While I'm on the map rock, I'll touch on a couple of other interesting things. I have a lot of people try to determine what it is. Some tell you it's a map to gold mines. Some tell you it's a map to other things. One gentleman was up there and was doing some interesting work. What I've got here is a quad map of the area. And what he did is he took this here figure, and this is kind of a ridge on the rock, and he kind of laid it out on this quad map. And you can come up after and look at this, and you'll see how where he's put the different holes here and the lines that draw it together. And he says that's what that means. This is just down below. These hieroglyphics are just right up here. This is just down below it. Maybe meaningful, maybe not. But it may perk your interest to go up there when you get your pick and shovel, right? He's after the gold, right? Okay. Okay, so it's some interesting things. I can give you a lot of maybe more questions today than you'll ever get answers. But there's a lot of interesting things up there. Yes, sir.
Just about the map rock, I took the Nevada State archaeologist up there and showed him the map rock. He was interested because he's got some of these symbols in his state. And when he looked at it, he named it a specific thing, but he says it was a classic altar. And he said that the dots would have been for bloodletting points, and the grooves would have let the blood run off the rock, and at the end of the rock, he said they'd have had a pot under there. So that's what his thing was.
Off the rock?
Yeah, and he said there would have been a pot underneath there to collect the blood. That's what he said it was. So just
okay. Another interesting story. You can see that there's a lot of ideas on what these things are. Jose Devilla came here in about mid-60s. 1965, he made a translation of these. And I'll spend most of my time on Devilla's translation, mostly because that's the one we have best documented. Whether it's true or not, this is what Jose Devilla says. Jose Devilla does tie it into religious and ties it to Moroni. But you're going to have to decide for yourself. We might correct it.
Was that all laid out by Indians?
This?
Yeah, all 3 of them.
Oh, I've got a whole bunch more than this. I don't believe they're Indian. If they are, it's a tribe we've not identified yet. Okay, let me give you a little more on this. A couple of interesting things about this. In 1965, there were some court battles going over who had the rights to the mining claims up there. And they were a little bit concerned about not being able to dig. They were going to lose their opportunity to dig up there. So a couple of young men who were working for Jose, I think I got their names there. Dwayne Neely and Wilford White. I guess it was in '66 they were up there and they was doing the digging. There's a shaft that was going straight down. And in that, they went down in that shaft a little early after they'd done some blasting. And both of them ended up dying there. Devilla was up in Salt Lake, I understand, and I think they were figuring that Monday that the judge was going to rule, and they was working on Sunday, and all these things happen, you know. So eventually you may hear about the 2 deaths that did take place. They did take place there. Some other interesting things that come out while I've been involved with this is I started collecting information on this when I came down in about 1981. I found a lot of people knew about them, had little bits and pieces of information, but nobody had it in one place. So I just started trying to collect as much as I could so that people could have fun with it and enjoy it. Well, since I've been there, I've come up with Jose Devilla's translation. Just very briefly, I have other people come in and say, no, Jose's out on a limb. That was not done by Moroni. That's Jaredite, another Book of Mormon culture. And then I also have people come in and say, oh, no, those guys are out on a limb. This is Mulekite. Okay? I have others come in that say, no, they're all on the wrong idea. Some of you may remember from your ancient American history when Cortez had Montezuma as a captor and was ransoming him for gold. And apparently legend has it at that time there was a mule train, I believe 40 mules loaded with gold. I think they said there was some of the Aztec princesses, and I think the scribe that worked for Cortez went north with that mule train loaded with gold. So they're looking for gold, and they say these are some of their writings. So they've been up looking for that. And I have a story down in the office. It's called the Bluebird Cave, where a group came across these writings, and they wanted to, and they believe that it has to do with Montezuma and that gold that went north. So they're looking for the gold, and they've come down here, and they did a lot of searching up here on the mountain. On one of their trips, the gentleman, just about dusk, came across the cave. And it says he went in the cave, he looked around, he says, on the floor, there's this big rock. It was there, and he couldn't move it, but it didn't fit with the rest of the cave. So he came back another time, and they found a cave, and there was some rock in there. It didn't appear to him to be the same cave, but there was a rock in there. They tried jacking, moving rocks, and didn't find anything. But he still thinks he did not in the right cave. So maybe there's a cave up there with all this gold in it. I don't know. But they have a story, and it's very interesting. And they came down and did their looking for these things. Another group that's come through and said this is a secret code that was used by the Jesuit priests that were assigned to all of the expeditions that were Spanish that came out 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. Says this is their writings. I've had others come in and say that was trying to locate all of these sites and see if they were associated with early mining by mostly the white people here, Spanish and or early Americans. And they were trying to see if they were tied together. I've had, then the other one is that one of the Hmong people that came out of Vietnam and was working down here at the mushroom plant. Remember when Vietnam fell, we had a lot of refugees come down and work down there. There was one of the gentlemen that was fairly educated, and I don't recall his name, but he basically, when he looked at the writings, he left some writings on the board up there also that he said these are the writings of the ancient Hmong culture. Not theirs today, an ancient culture. Okay, maybe we had some Hmong people over here hundreds of years. I don't know. So you can see there's lots of stories that have developed about these. Lots of different ideas. What I've got here is we'll go through a little bit of Devilla's translation of what he says these mean. In the meantime, I've just blown up a few photos and a few things of some of the other sites. I was just talking to Terry, and he says there's 24 known sites with this style of writing. So it's not just this one here. Just pass those around, you can look at them, and you'll see that there's quite a few others here.
Are those sites just in this area, or are they?
Okay, they're from, what do we got? Silver City, New Mexico. Then we come up, we've got Grand Junction, Del Norte. Where was the other one you said in Colorado?
Don't know the location.
Don't know the location.
Just another site in Colorado.
Another site in Colorado. We've got those coming up through Utah. We've got them at Cedar City, Fillmore, Nephi, Manti, Ogden,
Provo.
many others, and Provo.
Provo.
Yeah. We've got those that we know of in Utah. Now I've heard Pocatello. Is there one up there?
One in Pocatello.
One in Pocatello. I've not got a picture of it. Maybe I do now.
You do now.
Okay. And there's also sites, a couple of sites in Nevada, and several sites over towards San Francisco on the coast.
2 in Wyoming.
And 2 in Wyoming,
1 in Arizona.
1 in Arizona. Okay. And we're learning, we slowly keep finding more. So they're spread throughout the West. So whoever did it traveled this whole area. Yes.
Do any of them have the, what we call the signature on them?
Yes.
They do, all of them?
Yes. Not all of them, but you'll see in several of the pictures, she referred to what they call as Moroni's signature. That's this M with the I kind of below it. That figure there is on the one up here, and it's on several others. If you look real close, you'll see it on some of those. What's interesting to me is that that figure I never see in the text. Do you know of it being in the text on any, Terry?
I think
always see it off
there
to the
is one
side.
or two sites that might have it in the text, but the majority of it is off to the side.
Off to the side.
Yeah.
So maybe that is a signature.
I believe it is a signature of something, because I do believe it is a signature
So
of somebody.
just because of that, it does lead some credibility to it. And one of the things that Devilla said was that a handprint over the top of a mark personalizes it, which makes it a possible signature. Yes.
Those who are studying these, do they think it's done by the same person, by different people, just a culture kind of thing with a common language?
Have you heard any more whether it's just one person, or do you think a culture?
I don't think it's a culture, but I think there's 2 or 3 people, maybe 2 or 3 groups with one person doing it, because they're all, if you take a tracing of these and put them over the same symbol that's in another state, it's almost identical, like they carved them from a stamp. So it's like the same type of a handwriting.
And like in a lot of cultures, you may have only had a few people who did your writing hundreds of years ago. And then you can also ask you the question, like I said, I know these were found in 1939. How long did it take the moss and the lichen to grow over them? You know, a lot of you have been around a few years. How fast does that stuff grow up there on the rocks? Pretty slow. Lichens are very slow. So it's. I think that puts it probably at least back to the early entries of white men into the areas. Have you heard any other earlier dates on some of the other writings being found?
There was some found in California in the 30s, newspaper articles on some in the 50s in California. These, Frank Beckwith photographed these in 1925.
Was it 25? I thought 39 is the date he gave.
It might have been, but the information I got was 25, but that could be wrong. But
So they're interesting. So we know they go back at least back to then, and then they took moss and lichen growth all over the top of it. So someone that's a scientist in biology might be able to give you a little information on how long that may take. So it puts it probably down at least early white men and older. So very quickly now, we'll go through a little bit about what this one says. If you can see it there, you can see this first character up to the top. Looks a little bit more like a maybe a South American figure. It doesn't have just one. The way Devilla broke it down, if you read his translation, he takes like this curl part here means something, this means something, each of those different lines and combinations have meaning. And as a pictograph, he's taken them, they put all those meanings, it's like taking a sentence, jumbling it up together and putting it right there. So that's what you've got. So it's not just that picture means one thing. There's quite a few things that he's put together to make that meaning. He says that sign itself means to dig out of the earth, garland everlasting mineral records which are housed in a natural stone chamber. So that's what he says, just that preface means. And then he goes on to translate, say, number 2 through 6. Most of this is direction. He says 2 through 6 means commence a complete Shuit square area of 100 cubits or 178 feet per side, departing from the interception which are approximate as guides. What he's kind of saying there, he says the ancients measured a little bit different than we do. I'd tell you go north on a certain azimuth, so many feet, and dig your hole. What he was saying, they described theirs as is they made essentially a rectangle around it, and then they crossed the 2 diagonals from the 2 corners, and where they crossed is where you dug. A little different. That's essentially what Mr. Devilla is saying. Then we go on to the numbers, says 7 and 8. He says, from the perimeter of the Shuit set with the 4 cardinal points and put hole on the ground into the center of the periphery, which is basically, remember we talked about crossing those 2 diagonals? It's a long way to say that's where he dug. And then 9 through 13 says measured the 2 sides, 100 cubits long, embracing the North Star or the daughter of the constellation of the Great Bear to complete the Shuit area. Basically what he's saying, like, so you see this symbol right here? He says that's the North Star symbol to the Egyptian culture. So that's he gives the meanings of each one of these, but I'm just kind of roughly abbreviating them for you. And then he goes on to, translate kind of the rest of them. It says, commence descending 40 cubits. So he's got the place where he's going to put his hole. Then he said he's got to go 40 cubits. Okay, how long is a cubit? It's basically from here to here. Anybody, you want to compare your cubit with mine? You want to come up and compare yours? Yeah, come on up. Okay, what's a cubit?
Difference of 6 inches.
Okay, do you see some areas of some discrepancy and question? So cubits apparently were defined sometimes by the length of the rulers. And there are several different definitions as to exactly how far that is. When Devilla was doing some of their research up there, they found another rock out a ways which had a hand and a drill hole in it. And they did some measurements, and that came out a certain distance, and they divided that up by one of the known cubit figures, and apparently it was right on. So they says that's the cubit that was used in these. That's the cubit that they used. So like I said, it could be a little different for different people, couldn't it? So you can see you're having to do some interpreting here for Devilla to try and come up with some of these. So that's basically where they dug. Now when you go up there on the hill, there used to be a hole, a shaft that went straight down, and there was a car shoved in. We've buried that. We was afraid we was going to get somebody down there and lose somebody else in that hole. So the hole itself has been filled in. There is a shaft or an incline just down off the hill which has been caged to keep people out, which goes back in, going to that same area. So there is still some diggings and stuff up there. We have had people go in with drill rigs, and they drilled holes down from the surface, trying to find this cavern that Devilla described that these records are in. We can go on to the map rock here, or not the map, the signature rock. This is basically what Devilla said is Moroni's signature. This yin-yang symbol, it's an ancient symbol that's in quite a few cultures. He interpreted that basically as he who was changed hastily, totally constructed, formed of a shining substance as the sun. The three great gods of heaven and of the earth and of the spirit world. An angel of God, a resurrected person. That's a God of light. So basically, you can look at that two or three ways. Devilla said he came back and signed it as an angel. I don't know. It could also be that maybe means something of high importance. He also talked about the other symbol, which he said was lover of goodness and benevolence, minister and possessor of the power garments or priesthood, brilliantly exalted, made into, I can find out next to this, an angel or a God of light. So like I said, there's interesting things about it. That's what Devilla said these here mean. Yes?
Bill, did he interpret any of these others around? Or just this?
He made an I don't know, as Devilla had a lot of knowledge about a lot of the other sites. He had knowledge of the site in Cedar City. And I've not been able to get any paper documentation on his interpretation, but I'm told by those
I have that, Bill. I'll give it to you.
One?
Yeah.
Basically, I understand that it tells about some battles and burials that took place down there. Is that?
Yeah, and records laid away to the Lord, he says.
And
There
records laid
also.
away there too. So he has a copy of Devilla's translation for down there. So there, but I don't know if Devilla really knew about the majority of these other
He didn't know
sites.
about the other sides.
So there's a lot of other information that's come to pass since that. It's my understanding that Jose is still alive. If some of you go on some tours down there in Central America, I talked with Darlene Mundy, and she was on one of his tours. I met him again. Darlene was very involved with him when he was up here. But he is still alive and apparently doing some tours down there. Any other questions? Did you get a chance to look over some of those sites? You got any questions about some of those other pictures? Good. Anything you'd like to add, Terry? So if you're interested in going up to this site, I would recommend at least a pickup. It's a little bit of a, you don't need four-wheel drive, but it's a little rough, rugged, but you need a pickup and you can drive right up to this site. This rock here, you can drive right to it. It's just down below it. A couple of years ago, some people were up there trying to dig under it to get the treasure apparently that's buried under it. I don't know. But they were digging under it and they were moving it a little bit. So I've gone in and I filled it in with cement underneath and I filled the top back over. So hopefully that rock will stay there for generations for people to enjoy and look at.
Thank you very
Okay, well,
much.
thank you.